Welcome to the FootBridge Energy Leadership Series, where energy leaders build what powers tomorrow.
Welcome back to another episode of the FootBridge Energy Leadership Series. I'm joined here by Matt Carrara, CEO of Doble Engineering. Matt, thanks for joining.
How are you?
We're in your beautiful offices here in Marlborough, Massachusetts today. So looking forward to today's conversation. I know you have over 3 decades of experience in the energy space, intersection of process controls, measurement, different technologies enabling the industry. So I definitely want to do your introduction justice and give you a chance to kind of explain your background and how you got into energy. But first wanted to say thank you for joining the show here at the intersection of energy and industrial leadership.
Great, thank you.
So, maybe if you could start with, I know you're a Massachusetts native. How did you find your way into the energy space for Massachusetts?
So started out 30 years ago actually in plastics. Okay. So extrusion and injection molding, was in that industry for close to 9 to 10 years. And then after that moved into sort of light processing. So think oil and gas, water, wastewater, food and beverage. So always been in the measurement and control aspect of business. And then after spending roughly 28 to 30 years in that field, got one of those LinkedIn calls that said, hey, we're looking for a president of a company up in Marlborough. It was in the utility space. I knew it was a growing, active, pardon the pun, high energy industry. And a president role, I'll be honest, was always something that I wanted to step into. So after meeting some of the people, understanding the industry, and more importantly, understanding the culture of Doble, I knew it was a move that I wanted to make. So been here since 2023 and haven't looked back.
Great. Well, some of those industries touch on at FootBridge, we're on the staffing side of things. And I know you and I have talked a lot about numerous challenges for our industry, which we'll unpack today. But just industry-wise, we're focused on energy. So you talked about oil and gas, refining, could be battery storage, renewables, nuclear. That's what my team focuses on. So I think we'll have a lot of interesting kind of common ground to talk about there today. But one thing, just to go back to some of those industries that brought you here, how have you used those experiences and how have those added to your perspective in energy?
Well, I would say oil and gas in particular, like your utilities industry, rapid growth, rapid advancement, very slow to adapt on technology. And I think we're seeing a lot of that in the utility industry where grid issues and issues with demand and supply are beginning to come into the industry a little bit because they're not keeping up with technology, they're not keeping up with investment. So I would say in both oil production and energy production or electric production, we have the same issue. We're not investing enough in what needs to go from growth in the market.
Okay, and we'll get into that. I know you've done some pieces, some articles, and other videos on that as well. So it's a really interesting point. You also talked about your leadership style, that command and control kind of emphasis. Can you talk a little bit about that and some of the leadership
for me, especially coming into here, I didn't know the industry. So I certainly wasn't going to come in with what I thought this business needed to do to be run. So when I first came in and I first started, my first promise to the employees were I was going to learn about the people first, so all the people within the organization. I was going to learn the numbers next, which seems like a strange comment, but I really wanted to understand the nuances of what the business was generating. And then third, I would focus on the industry itself. So for 6 months, I made a commitment that I would not change anything and I would not make a decision that would impact anything. 6 months in a day is when we really started changing and evolving Doble into what it's become today. So for me, it was more about understanding that I had incredible talent beneath me. And I've said it often in a lot of my leadership things that I've been speaking about. I have an incredibly smart team around me. So it's my job as a leader, how do I pull the best out of them instead of telling them what to do? And I think the team here has responded quite well.
Great, yeah. So that first 6 months was really digesting all the information to make that informed kind of action plan.
Absolutely. And it was always about active listening more than anything else. And I had heard a comment out of Simon Sinek, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. As leaders, we're in charge of the people who are in charge of the people who are in charge of the people who produce results. And that was something I'm trying to drive down through the organization. We're here to remove roadblocks. It's the people in the business that are generating the goodness of Doble.
That's great. Well, a few years in, clearly we can say that's working so far. We'll keep the pedal to the metal.
We've had 3 years of strong growth, and even prior to that, we had strong growth, I would say, pre-COVID. But we are certainly taking advantage of what's going on in the industry, no doubt.
Great. Well, maybe from a few-year period, we can zoom out. I know, obviously, as a brand, there's a long legacy there. Can you talk a little bit about leading a brand that's been around for a long time into kind of a new age of digitization and analytics and data and all these things that are talked about?
Yeah, one of the challenges when I first started interviewing for this role, it was very difficult to understand who Doble was and what they did. And they had made 5 or 6 acquisitions over a 5 or 6 year time period, and they weren't all integrated properly. So there was a lot of confusion on brands and messaging and things like that. So one of the things that I've been focusing on the last couple of years was, what is the Doble story? What is the Doble message? And I think we've done a really good job in the last 3 years creating the image that Doble is in the industry today. I mean, it is known in the industry. There's a test called the Doble test. We don't talk about it much. We do now. But Doble is considered one of the leaders in the industry, the monitoring of the power grid infrastructure. And I think we're doing a good job telling that story now.
Yeah. Well, that was clear to me. You had invited me to your conference in Boston in March just to get a sense and feel of that community that you guys have built. And I thought that really came through with the way that people viewed your brand and just talking to folks in the community. So I was very impressed by it, and I think you guys are doing a great job with that piece of it.
Yeah, part of the challenge was, especially in the acquisitions, was who bought who. So we've actually worked on a brand consolidation over the last 6 months. So going forward, all the customer-facing brand will be one, and it'll be Doble.
Okay, great. And you touched on diagnostics a little bit in that one, but there's some of the traditional technologies that the community is very familiar with. There's some newer technologies. I heard a bit about that at the event as well. How are you guys balancing kind of that, go-to-market play or balancing customer expectations?
Part of the challenge is, like I said earlier, it's a slow industry to adapt to new technology. So when you look at the equipment side of things, we're using equipment that have been the same equipment for the last 30, 40 years. Yes, we're making upgrades to it, but those are what are the cornerstone of the diagnostic measurement and testing of a transformer, of a circuit breaker, of a cable. Where we're trying to change the industry a little bit differently is on the data side. So we have various types of software packages where we can take our equipment and other data points or sensors within the substation and pull them in and do analytics. We're actually working on how do we create one pane of glass, one platform. So we can go into a substation, pull data from not only our equipment, but anybody's equipment that's in there, and then give actionable insights to the operators that are in the substation. So we're seeing a lot around the digitization part, but it's more about giving the right data to the individual so they can make the right decision. And that, to me, is where the industry is going.
Okay. And then, with us being in staffing, my brain kind of goes to that probably brings about new skill sets that you guys may be looking for with yourselves or maybe your partners. Is that something that you see as well?
Yeah, one of the challenges that we're seeing is a lot of the knowledge that's in the industry is retiring. So you have an age gap of, I'll say, people in the latter part of their career and new people coming out of, coming out of college. So there's a gap of probably 20 years of that knowledge that is going to be going by the wayside soon. So when you talk about the events that we do about 8 or 9 around the globe. We actually offer training and continuing education credits to engineers that are in the utility industry so they can stay up to date to what's going on in the market. So we have a lot of our customers that rely on us solely to keep that training and education and knowledge at the forefront because they're losing people and they're bringing in people that don't have the same skill set.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, you kind of went right into my next question about skill sets that might be atrophying or retiring out. And our contract side of the business, a lot of times companies will kind of ask to bring folks back on a contracted basis just because they need to bridge that talent gap and kind of bring that mind share back in and train the next generation. So it's a big challenge. Companies are looking to address it tons of different ways, and always curious to hear how leaders like yourself are thinking about it too.
Well, I think it goes into, again, our events that we do an awful lot of webinars, training, seminars, where we're bringing in either linemen or transformer engineers and teaching them what to expect when they see things that are happening in the industry. We have a course where we can teach people, it's a little bit of a post-mortem analysis of, hey, a transformer failed, here are the reasons why, and this is what you can do in the future to keep it from happening again. So it's more about upskilling the incoming, I'll say, class of employees versus how do you pull the knowledge out of those that are leaving.
I think I actually sat in on a vertical pole failure for one of the generator sessions, and a little technical for my understanding, but I could see how the model works and how there's a support system
Yes.
for people that need help with those issues, and it's really interesting. So
Good.
So maybe moving into some of the industry challenges and opportunities, can we talk about resilience? There's been some extreme weather events.
Yes.
How do you guys balance helping the grid to become more resilient with some of these changes that are happening maybe at a macro level?
Well, I think if you look at all the things that are impacting the grid today, it's first and foremost data centers and AI. The amount of drain that the data centers are giving, it used to be on average a couple of years ago about 5% of the load. They expect as we come out of 2026, it's going to be 15 to 18% of the overall load on the grid.
Yeah.
So that's a real big issue. Industrialization, if you think about companies that are now moving back to the US, there's going to be new plants, new needs for new substations and upgrades to the grid. So the whole reshoring impact has been huge. EVs.
Yeah.
EVs, I think, are 6% of the load. They expect it to be 11 or 12 in the next probably 5 to 6 years.
Yeah.
So we keep putting more things on the grid, and the grid's not being updated and invested in enough to have an impact. Extreme weather is another one. We talked about it earlier, where in Europe we're seeing changes in climate where people now need air conditioning that didn't need it before because of extreme heat. In the U.S., and I'll say more central U.S. to the West Coast, we're seeing people that now need heat because of changes in how the cold
Cooler.
is.
Yeah.
So we're literally just putting more and more strain on the grid on a daily basis. And the problem is the average transformers in the U.S. are greater than 45 years old,
Wow.
on a lifespan of 60. So we're getting to the point where we're putting too much burden on, and that's part of the problem. But where Doble can come in is on a transformer, for example, we can do a test that determines how much load they can actually put more on the grid. So typically when you have a power surge or a big demand in power, you have a rolling blackout. And the view is that we're going to see more and more of those as time goes on.
Yeah.
But if you look at a transformer that typically runs at 60%, 70%, we can actually tell the customer, you know what, you can go to 85, and you're not going to go back on how many years it could be in play.
Yeah.
So we're allowing them to extend the life of their assets, which is the only way that we're going to be able to sustain what's going on.
Yeah, because there is sometimes a backlog with some of these things as well.
Yeah,
that can develop if it's.
When I started here 3 years ago, you could get a transformer in 12 to 14 months.
Yeah.
We're at 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So the backlog of transformers alone is so big that it's tough to upgrade the infrastructure. So if we can extend the life of that asset for 1 or 2 or 3 years,
Yeah.
that's a big help.
Yeah, interesting. I've talked to some project executives that are planning T&D projects out in 2030, 32, and thinking about some of those assets that they're going to need already.
Yeah, a lot of the transformer manufacturers are actually building plants in the U.S. And you think about the fact that it takes 2 to 3 years to get a plant up and running.
Yeah.
They're still thinking about this backlog that's going to be here
So
for
it's
8,
that
10,
big.
15 years.
Yeah.
It's huge.
It's worthwhile. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I think we were talking about this a little bit before, maybe some global best practices. You mentioned some of the things happening in Europe with increased demand for, maybe power for AC,
Yeah.
but are there any other regions that are good examples of what they're doing with the grid or?
I think Europe overall is probably one of the bigger ones, but even when you get into a little separate from Europe in the UAE, in Saudi, they're putting a lot of money in both sides of the power generation equation. So they're investing in oil and gas, but they're also investing in renewables.
Yeah.
So I think they've found a perfect balance of how can you generate power to keep up with what's going on. What had happened in the U.S., and it's surely a political stance, obviously, but when renewables became big in the prior administration, and we saw the dialing back of, coal and oil and things like that, it wasn't a one-to-one. So we were taking out plants, but we weren't putting renewables in
Yeah.
at the same
At the
speed,
same rate.
which is why we have this gap. And now we've gone the other direction where we're sort of metering back on renewables and putting more back into oil and gas. So I think the lesson learned from what's going on internationally is there can be a balance. And if we can create that balance in the U.S., a lot of this problem you see will go away.
Yeah. I love that perspective. And what I'm hearing a lot talking to folks in the field every day, construction managers or planner schedulers, those type of folks, engineers, is a lot of gas pipeline,
Yep.
a lot of nuclear interest, but there's obviously the licensing component. And then, just like you said, some of the other fossil projects
Yes.
that are kind of coming back that are a little surprising. maybe a few years back.
I always joke when I was in oil and gas, I wanted more oil and gas investment. Now I'm in this side, I want more renewables investment. So even I have to balance it out a bit.
Yeah. Well, balanced approach helps everyone.
Yeah.
So if you're open to talking about it, are there any mistakes that maybe you made early in your career that you think maybe panned out and ended up working out, or you didn't think at the time? Or?
I would say my biggest challenge in my career was, so I took over running my first company when I was 30. So I was very young. So I hadn't had the full chance to develop my leadership skills at that point in time. I still am. I'm not going to say I'm done yet. But I think the younger self was the feeling that I needed full control, be in charge of everything, and my way was the only way. And over time, we obviously let go of that, but that was the biggest thing. I tried to do too much and try to control too much rather than I'm surrounded by all these incredibly intelligent people. Let them do the work and let me find a way to get the best out of them.
Well, you can really hear that come through in the beginning of the episode where you talked about your current leadership style. Sounds like it was kind of informed from some of those,
You learn as you get older.
And then, you've worked globally, traveled all over for work. I mean, is there a place that sticks out to you as a kind of career-defining memory?
For me, I worked for a company called Roper Industries in 2007 is when I became part of a company that they had acquired. And I think it was 2010, I'd put forth an acquisition of a company in China. So it was their first, not only international acquisition, but it was the first time they ever acquired a company in China. So the learnings behind that, behind the ability to go in and take over a company like that, learning the culture, learning about the people, I think was probably the most defining moment for me, because then it really cemented with me, when you go into these things, even if it's a domestic acquisition, you need to understand the people and the culture and what's going on. Because I have a little saying that I came up with in a meeting I was in a couple of weeks ago. In order to lead the room, you have to read the room. So you need to know what's going on in people's minds in order to lead them. And that experience with its language barriers and culture was probably the biggest for me.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great example. And then I know outside of work, I think you're a Boston sports fan, I hear.
Yep.
Do you have a favorite player you can share?
So I was thinking about this question, and the obvious answer would be like Brady or Bird or Ortiz. For me, the ultimate player was Troy Brown. So you think someone that was playing offense, defense, consummate utility player, consummate team player. To me, he sums that up.
Yeah, Troy is, I think he set the standard for a lot of Patriots to come. Julian and some of those guys too.
Nothing against the rest of them.
Yeah, some
He's
good
still my favorite.
Some good options to choose from there. So I guess, a closing question that I like to ask some of our guests or some variation of, and our first guest kind of talked about, surprisingly, data structure and those skills being very important. But like, if we're sitting down in 5 years, what are we talking about that's, maybe Doble's done or been a part of in the energy industry that's been transformative?
I think
skill set that you think we should all be thinking about?
I think for us, for Doble, what we're looking at going down the road on this AI front, I think is going to be industry changing for our type of business. I mean, if we can be known, continue to be known as the key supplier for, I'll say, substation uptime and analytics, that would be the key for me. But I think getting this whole AI thing up and running and taking all of the knowledge from these conferences, and remember, all these 100 years of conference proceedings are from customers and people in the industry. It's not from us. So it's a little bit of, we're giving back to the industry what the industry gave us over 100 years. And I think that's going to be key.
It sounds like there's going to be a lot of demand for folks getting their hands on that information and just making it easier to absorb in their workflows as well.
There's a lot of knowledge. We just have to find a way to get it to people.
Well, I will say on my side, one of the projects that I'm interested to see is just some of the advanced nuclear and how that goes through licensing and development, and to see if those things actually come to fruition. I know there's a lot in the works right now. I think that will help to alleviate some of the pressure on the grid. And,
Absolutely.
That's a fun one. Our CEO was a nuclear engineer 25 plus years ago, so we've got deep roots in nuclear as well. But well, thank you very much for joining. Where can folks get more information on Doble?
So obviously on the internet, so go to dobleengineering.com is the key one. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active. I would say almost every other day I'm putting up content about what's going on in the industry, but not only from the utility space, but from a leadership space as well. So I think we're putting up a lot of good content over the last couple of years.
Okay. And obviously this is going to be up on LinkedIn. We'll get it shared out with our audience. And Matt, I can't thank you enough for having me in your office
Thank
today.
you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.